In 1893, Scotland was shaken by the Ardlamont murder. A young heir, Cecil Hambrough, was found dead on a hunting trip, and suspicion fell on his tutor, Alfred Monson. What followed became one of the most controversial trials in Scottish history. But before we start, make sure you like and subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring you more videos like this, so get ready as we go to Scotland. August 10th, 1893. Dawn broke over Ardlamont Estate on the western coast of Scotland. The house sat among dense woodland near the shore of the Kyles of Bute, isolated and quiet. 3 men prepared for a morning shooting expedition. Cecil Hambrough, a young man of 20, eager and trusting. Alfred John Monson, 33 years old, his tutor and supposed friend. And Edward Scott, a man Monson introduced as a shooting expert, though nobody knew much about him. They walked into the woods carrying shotguns, moving between the trees as morning mist clung to the ground. The air was still. Birds called from the branches above. Then a single gunshot cracked through the silence. Cecil Hambrough fell dead, a blast to the head at close range. His body lay among the ferns and undergrowth, blood soaking into the Scottish earth. Monson emerged from the woods, claiming a terrible accident had occurred. The young man had stumbled, his gun had discharged, and he had died instantly. A tragic mistake, nothing more. But nothing about Ardlamont was as simple as it seemed. Cecil Hambrough came from a wealthy family. He was the son of Major Dudley Hambrough, a military man with money and property. Cecil was young, impressionable, and perhaps not the sharpest mind. He had fallen under the influence of Alfred Monson, a man who presented himself as a gentleman and educator. Monson had taken Cecil on as a pupil, promising to guide him, teach him, prepare him for life as a gentleman. But Monson was drowning in debt. He lived beyond his means, borrowed heavily, and left unpaid bills wherever he went. He needed money desperately. And Cecil Hambrough, with his family wealth and trusting nature, looked like an opportunity. Monson convinced Cecil to lease Ardlamont Estate. The property belonged to the Hambrough family through complex arrangements, but Monson persuaded Cecil that taking control of it would be a wise investment. Cecil agreed. He signed papers. He put his name to agreements he barely understood. Monson moved into Ardlamont with his wife and children, living off Cecil's money while presenting himself as the young man's mentor and friend. Then came the insurance policies. Monson arranged for Cecil's life to be insured for significant sums, multiple policies with different companies, policies that would pay out if Cecil died. The beneficiary of some of these policies was Alfred Monson himself, a tutor insuring his student's life. It raised no alarms at the time. Insurance companies took the premiums and asked few questions. In early August, Monson invited Edward Scott to Ardlamont. Scott was described as an engineer and shooting expert, though his background remained vague. He arrived on August 8th. 2 days later, Cecil Hambrough was dead. The local doctor examined the body. The wound was devastating. Shotgun blast to the skull at close range. Monson's story was that Cecil had been climbing through a fence or over a dike when his gun caught and discharged. An accident. The doctor had doubts immediately. The angle of the wound looked wrong. The distance seemed inconsistent with Monson's explanation. But accidental shootings happened. Guns were dangerous. Maybe it was possible. Then the insurance companies heard about Cecil's death, multiple policies on a young man's life, death occurring just weeks after those policies were taken out, a tutor who would benefit financially. Red flags went up immediately. The companies refused to pay.
They demanded investigation. They contacted the authorities. Police began looking closely at what happened in those woods. They examined the scene. They questioned Monson. They looked for Edward Scott, but he had vanished, disappeared completely after the shooting. Nobody could find him. Nobody knew where he had gone. His presence at Ardlamont suddenly seemed extremely suspicious. Investigators dug deeper into Monson's finances. They found chaos, massive debts, unpaid bills across Scotland and England, legal judgments against him. He was a man on the edge of financial ruin, and Cecil Hambrough's death would have solved all his problems. The insurance money would have cleared his debts and left him comfortable. Then came a darker discovery. The night before Cecil died,
there had been another incident. The three men had gone out on a boat in the Kyles of Bute. According to Monson, the boat had capsized in the dark water. Cecil had nearly drowned. Monson claimed he had saved the young man, pulled him from the water, rescued him from certain death. A hero, a loyal friend. But witnesses and investigation suggested something else. The boat had not simply capsized by accident. There were questions about how it happened, why it happened, whether someone had deliberately caused it to overturn. Had there been an attempt to drown Cecil the night before he was shot? If the drowning had succeeded, it would have looked like a boating accident. When that failed, did Monson turn to a more direct method? The authorities arrested Alfred Monson. He was charged with the murder of Cecil Hambrough. The case became a sensation. Newspapers across Britain followed every detail. The trial opened in December 1893 at the High Court in Edinburgh. Scotland's legal system and finest legal minds would decide Monson's fate. The prosecution built their case carefully. They presented the financial motive. They showed the insurance policies. They demonstrated Monson's desperate need for money. They brought medical experts who testified that the wound was inconsistent with an accident. The angle was wrong. The distance was wrong. Someone had fired that shotgun directly at Cecil's head. They presented evidence about the boat incident. They argued it was a failed first attempt at murder. They painted Monson as a calculating killer who had befriended a vulnerable young man, manipulated him, used him, and then killed him for insurance money. Edward Scott, they suggested, was either an accomplice or a convenient witness Monson could later claim had actually fired the shot. But Scott could not be found to testify. His absence hung over the trial like a ghost. The defense fought back hard. They attacked the medical evidence. They brought their own experts, who said the wound could have been caused by an accident. They argued that shotgun wounds were unpredictable, that the angle and distance could be explained by Cecil's stumbling or falling as the gun discharged. They portrayed Monson as a victim of circumstance, a man whose financial troubles were being used to paint him as a murderer. They could not explain away the insurance policies easily, but they argued that insuring Cecil's life was not in itself evidence of murder. It was unusual, yes, but not criminal. They emphasized that no one had actually witnessed Monson shoot Cecil. The evidence was circumstantial. Without a witness, without a confession, without proof beyond reasonable doubt, how could they convict? The trial lasted 9 days. The jury heard all the evidence, all the arguments, all the theories about what happened in those woods. Then they retired to consider their verdict. Scottish law offers 3 possible verdicts: guilty, not guilty, and not proven. That third option, unique to Scotland, means the jury believes the accused might be guilty, but the evidence is insufficient to convict. It is an acquittal, but one that carries suspicion, doubt, a shadow that never lifts. The jury returned with their verdict: not proven. Alfred Monson walked free, legally acquitted, but the verdict meant the jury suspected him. They thought he probably killed Cecil Hambrough.
they just could not prove it beyond reasonable doubt. The missing witness, Edward Scott, left a hole in the case. The medical evidence was debated and unclear. The circumstantial nature of the prosecution's case left room for doubt. Monson's freedom brought him no peace. The not proven verdict marked him forever. Society shunned him. His name was ruined. He could not escape the suspicion. He tried to rebuild his life, tried to move on, but the shadow of Ardlamont followed him everywhere. He died in 1909, never able to clear his name, never able to shake the belief that he had murdered Cecil Hambrough. Edward Scott was never found. His identity remained a mystery. Some believed he was an accomplice who fled to avoid prosecution. Others thought he might have been the actual killer, hired by Monson to do the deed. Or perhaps he was simply a man caught up in events beyond his understanding, who vanished to avoid being dragged into a murder trial. His disappearance ensured the full truth of what happened that August morning would never be known. Cecil Hambrough was 20 years old when he died, a young man used and discarded, whether by accident or by design. His family mourned him and fought to understand what had happened. The insurance companies never paid out. They had been right to be suspicious. The Ardlamont case became one of Victorian Scotland's most famous trials. It raised questions about insurance fraud, about the exploitation of vulnerable young men by those they trusted, about the limits of circumstantial evidence in securing convictions. The not proven verdict sparked debate that continues to this day about whether Scotland should keep that third option or follow England's simpler guilty or not guilty system. Did Alfred Monson murder Cecil Hambrough? Most people who studied the case believed he did. The motive was clear, the opportunity was there, the suspicious circumstances were overwhelming. But in a court of law, belief is not enough. Proof is required, and the proof was just beyond reach. The woods at Ardlamont still stand. The estate remains, though time has moved on and the events of 1893 have faded into history. But the question lingers. What really happened among those trees on that August morning? Did a young man die by accident, or was he murdered by the man he trusted most? The Scottish jury could not decide, and so the mystery remains, suspended forever in that uniquely Scottish verdict, not proven.